Real quick, before we get started, we have play to win coins. You can get them at our website down below. They say play to win and play to lose. Hold on. All right, you ready? Here, look at them. They're super cool. Wow. Oh my God. Thanks.
Oh, wow.
Welcome to a Play to Win Deck Tech, where we talk about decks in cEDH. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Cameron. This week we're going to talk about Urza Polymorph.
Urza Polymorph is a mono blue cEDH deck, kind of a cross between a mid-range and a stacks deck. But before we get into what Urza is and how we're playing this deck, let's talk about some of the pros and cons of Urza in cEDH.
That's a great idea to start this off. So a couple reasons why you would want to play Urza. Number one, if you're looking for a monocolor deck, this is probably one of the more powerful monocolor decks you could build, especially in mono blue specifically. This is a great stacks deck that lets you break parity on a lot of really powerful stacks pieces,
while lets you playing a lot of counter magic, something that a lot of stacks decks don't have the best access to.
Exactly. This deck is also incredibly resilient as well. So if you have a field or a meta that has a lot of interaction, this is a great deck to bring to something like that too.
Some of the negatives of Urza, it kind of folds to Collector Oof and Draneth Magistrate, as well as a couple other choice stacks pieces, which is why Cameron is playing a couple extra interaction spells. We'll get to that later on though. What are some other cons of this deck?
Well, you are in a monocolor deck, so you are limited in terms of your card choices.
The power level ceiling is slightly lower than that of a 4-color deck because you don't get access to so many colors.
Right, I have to run slightly worse tutors because I don't get Vamp and Demonic Tutor.
But you get to make up for that with a lot of synergy and a lot of cards that are specifically good with Urza. We'll get into some of those signature cards in a second, but first let's talk about the actual win conditions in the deck. How are we winning?
So if you go through the video library, you will notice that the only actual polymorph deck is the one from the more recent video. My original excursion into Urza was not polymorph, and you can tell that I was a much more naive cEDH player at the beginning of my career when the channel started.
You can also actually check out all of the Urza games that we've ever played on the channel and the playlist down below. This is something new that I'm doing, that there's playlists for all of the commanders that we've ever played. So if you want to go deep into a specific commander, you can now do that on our channel. There'll be some links down below.
But make sure you check out our episode on the Commander Clash so that you can see the Urza deck actually win a game somewhere else.
One of the strengths of Urza is also that its win condition is a little bit difficult to interact with once you have it going on. The chain is a little bit hard to break up because there are just so many ways Urza can win the game.
So I think before we are able to dive into this deck, we should talk about what Urza does. So Urza is a combo outlet in your command zone,
as well as being kind of a mana engine as well, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it's very powerful in there. It is a 4-mana 1/4, costs 2 blue and 2 colorless. It says that you can tap artifacts you control to add blue mana to your mana pool. When it enters the battlefield, you get to create a 0/0 construct. Everyone calls them constructs. You could hear me choke trying to not say construct there. And that construct specifically has +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So it can already be a really big beater. It can tap for mana, but you can put 5 generic mana into Urza as well to shuffle your library, exile the top card, and then until end of turn you can cast that.
There's a lot of things. Urza has a lot of words on it. It can do a lot of stuff. You can utilize a lot of its abilities in a lot of different ways. Although that construct token does get really big, that's not really why we're using it here in cEDH, right?
No.
The main reason and the sake of this deck is Polymorph. The main reason why Polymorph is good is because we're getting rid of that token, right?
Exactly, and you can still have your commander in play and still use Polymorph to start your comboing from there.
So let's talk about the win conditions of the deck. We need to go over what we're actually winning with the deck and work backwards from there.
Right, so we've already talked about Polymorph a ton, and there's 2 different Polymorph effects that you'll see in this deck. You'll see Polymorph itself and the Proteus Staff as well, which is basically a Polymorph you can do multiple times just for more mana. What I like about Polymorph over other Urza variants that I played is that it gives you the option to have 2 1-card win conditions in your deck that non-Polymorph Urza decks don't have period.
And that's a big deal. One card win conditions, in my opinion, are you need to have them in your deck. cEDH has evolved so much that just having simple 2-card win conditions is not going to be enough. You need one card that can do it all, that can get it done. In some decks, that's Ad Nauseam. In other decks, that's Birthing Pod. In this deck, it's Polymorph effects.
Exactly. Now, what are we polymorphing into? Specifically, Tidespout Tyrant and the new Hull Breacher as well. No, it's a Hull Breaker. Again, something else I keep doing. But these basically let you loop your free and very cheap artifacts by returning them to your own hand using their abilities.
Right, so if you cast an artifact, you can bounce another artifact, and with Urza, you can tap that first artifact for mana, and then you can cast that artifact that you bounced back down again, bouncing the initial artifact, tap that for a blue mana, and repeat back and forth until you have a whole bunch of mana.
Exactly. So it's very easy to assemble infinite mana from there.
The cons, though, is that you're not playing any other creatures in your deck. There's no Gilded Drake, there's no Spellseeker, no Consecrated Sphinx, which other versions of Urza might be interested in playing. You're not playing any of that. And also, strangely, your build is a little different from some of the builds that you'll see in the database. You're playing both of the big idiots. Most lists are only playing one.
And I understand why people only want to play one, but what really drove me to want to put this deck together was the printing of a second Tidespout Tyrant. What really blows, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is getting Chain of Vapored while you're trying to Tidespout out. Or even worse, if someone exiles it, there is no recursion in this deck. So if you're interrupted in that way, you're done. But what's super nice with Proteus Staff specifically, it gives you another opportunity to then re-polymorph into your second backup Tyrant so that way you don't have to fret.
It gives you more options, really. That's the biggest thing that it does. The cons of having both in your deck is that you're more likely to draw one of them, which isn't good, I'll be honest. But the positives are you have a lot more backups. If someone, for some reason, gets rid of one of your threats, you have another one. You can go again. And that resiliency is going to be really helpful grinding out mid-range battles.
And my argument against having one in your opening hand for the bonus one specifically is that it's cheaper and it has flash. And you get a lot of mana in this deck with Urza very quickly. So you can still realistically get that thing out in play on turn 3, turn 4 a lot of the time.
Right, yeah. And by itself, it's also still, even if it's not a combo piece, both Tidespout and the Hullbreaker Horror are really good at bouncing your opponent's stuff, controlling spells, especially the new one can bounce things on the stack, which can be really powerful until you're ready to win the game.
Exactly. So it does start to make sense why I would be willing to give up Gilded Drake for this ability.
Yeah, so that's the main win condition. We're going to be polymorphing away our construct token that's made by Urza, and then after we polymorph, we get one of these big idiots in play, and with one other free or cheap artifact, we can normally start a loop that would allow us to go over that combo that I was talking about earlier to make infinite mana. Once you make infinite mana, activate Urza infinite times, exile your whole deck. We'll talk about some of the other ways to actually close out the game in a second, but what are some other ways that you can make infinite mana in this deck? Because there are some other options too.
Oh yeah, so one of the more famous options is Isochron Scepter Dramatic Reversal. So you cast Isochron Scepter, put Dramatic Reversal under it, and especially with Urza, it is super easy to have enough artifacts in place so that way you're able to generate infinite mana as you keep activating Isochron Scepter over and over and over again.
You'll need to have mana rocks that can tap for 3 total mana because it costs 2 mana to activate Isochron Scepter, so you need 1 additional mana to make that loop go infinite on mana. But realistically, as long as you have 3 artifacts in play, they don't even have to be mana rocks. Urza makes them all tap for a blue. So as long as you have 3 artifacts in play besides these, you should be able to get infinite mana, exile your whole deck with Urza, win the game.
Yeah, I guess rocks is just a term that you'll hear me say that will start referring to not actual rocks in other decks.
It's all rocks in Urza.
But they're all rocks in this deck, yeah. Now, we're not done.
There's more win conditions in this deck.
Well, there's more ways to even just make infinite mana here, too. Okay. So we have Power Artifact. Now, Power Artifact goes really well with 2 cards in particular. Power Artifact goes well with Grim and Basalt Monolith here. So if you just slap a Power Artifact onto either one of these, it will reduce their activation costs so that way you can just keep paying it over and over and over again using the mana you're making from these 2 cards themselves.
One nice thing about Grim Monolith is it's a powerful ramp spell on its own, and again, we're going to touch on more strengths of Urza, which each one of these cards, but the infinite infinite colorless specifically. These two make colorless infinite mana, but Urza doesn't need it to be any other type besides colorless. It can still exile the cards, and even with Urza, once you make that infinite colorless mana, you can start tapping it for a blue because Urza's so fucking good.
Exactly, and just get it through there. Now, Basalt Monolith also works really well with Rings of Brighthearth, and that's really the only reason why this card is in the deck, so that way you're able to go infinite off of Basalt Monolith. This actually has won me more games than putting Power Artifact on anything, so
all colorless mana right there. There's no blue mana necessary right there. Power Artifact needs 2 blue, and although Urza does make that easy, it's easier to use colorless mana.
Exactly. So that's kind of like your Power Artifacts pile right there as your final way to be able to get infinite mana.
So these are step 1 of the win condition, either Polymorph or just straight up 2-card infinite mana combo. We have infinite mana. We can activate Urza to exile our entire library and cast all of our spells. How are we actually winning the game? How do we close out the game? How do we make our opponents dead?
Well, there's a couple ways that you can do this, and the one that's actually been most common for me and the easiest to put together has been Codex Shredder. When you're going through your Tidespout Tyrant loops, each time that you are making mana off of Mana Rock, let's say like specifically one that makes multiple mana, like
Mana Crypt.
Exactly. So if you have Mana Crypt in play and you're looping it with Codex Shredder, not only are you generating infinite mana, but as you're going through the loop, you can tap the Shredder to start milling your opponents out.
So how it'll go is you'll have a Codex Shredder in play, you will tap it to mill someone for 1 card, then you will cast your free artifact spell, Mana Crypt or something, bouncing the Codex Shredder back to your hand. Then you can tap the Codex Shredder for a blue or anything. It doesn't really matter. The Codex Shredder's back in your hand. That's the important part. Once you recast the Codex Shredder, that's going to enter and bounce the Mana Crypt again. Then you can tap the Codex Shredder once more to mill someone out and cast the Mana Crypt again, bounce your Codex Shredder, and we have a loop.
And go over and over and over again. Codex Shredder also works really well if you are going off via Isochron Scepter, because every time that you cast the Revelation, it itself will untap, and you can just keep milling everyone out that way as well.
Right, so basically what we're doing, we'll mill all of our opponents out, and then you're just going to pass the turn. But there are some decks that have Titans in their list, so it's important to think about that if your strategy is mill, because they may just mill their Titans back into the library. That might not always be relevant, but sometimes it will. So
that is very true. That is very true. And this does come up because one of the other actual finishers is Drown in Dreams. So like you can draw your whole deck and then use Drown in Dreams to actually kill 2 players by making someone draw out theirs and then milling someone else out.
Right, so maybe there's a Curse Totem in play. Rather than getting rid of the Curse Totem, you don't want to get rid of the Curse Totem because there are other decks that can benefit from that or something. You don't use your Urza at all. You just make infinite mana and you cast this to draw your whole deck old-fashioned.
And then the other way that will go off is specifically with Isochron Scepter, and that is Copy Artifact. You can put almost anything under a Copy Artifact and be able to kind of cast your whole deck at that point as you're generating infinite mana and getting infinite untaps with your Isochron Scepter.
Right, so back to the Titans. Say you can't mill everyone out. How do you actually make them dead? Well, luckily Swan Song is a fantastic card, and we're going to use that to actually make infinite birds and attack our opponents to death.
Exactly, yeah. So you're able to kind of loop through your whole deck a lot of the times by putting your infinite mana into Urza, which will give you access to your whole deck, and you can keep countering things off of Swan Song and putting Swan Song back into your deck using Time Twister.
Right, so what we're going to do is after our whole deck is exiled, we're going to cast a spell, any spell. It doesn't matter what the spell is because we're going to Swan Song our own spell. We'll make a 2/2 bird. Both of those cards go into the graveyard. Then we can cast some other spells that will fill up our graveyard, and then a Time Twister followed up by a Narset's Reversal, bouncing the Time Twister to our hand. This is going to have the Time Twister's effect go in the stack, but we're still going to be able to shuffle the Time Twister as well as all those cards that we cast, including a spell and a Swan Song, back into our library and draw 7. That's why we need to cast a couple extra spells to make sure that we have 7 in our library. So once we do that, we can shuffle those cards back into our library, draw 7. We still have infinite mana, so then we just do that again. We drew those 7 cards. One of them is Swan Song, one of them is another spell. We're going to keep on doing that, shuffling those cards back in. Also, Narset is going to be out in play so that our opponents aren't drawing cards if that matters. We have access to our whole deck, so it really doesn't. But we keep on doing this process enough times, we will make infinite birds, and then we can pass the turn with access to all the counter spells that we want because we're going to be able to sculpt our hand, basically.
It is very convoluted, but there are not a lot of decks that still run Titans, so this is really when you run into a Gitrog player.
Or what if someone Force of Negations your Codex Shredder and it exiles it?
True.
That could happen. There's going to be, I think that's one of the strengths of Urza is it's resilient. You can get rid of the win conditions and there's more win conditions.
Exactly. Exactly, yeah. So we're going to end up putting cards like Swansong and Narset's Reversal back in the stack interaction pile over here where they actually belong.
One of the many reasons why Swansong is so incredibly good, the fact that it's already one of the most efficient counterspells in the game, but can also be used as a win con is super neat.
And a couple of these other cards that we've mentioned, like Time Twister and Narset Parter of Veils, also just work good on their own outside of Infinite Mana as well.
Time Twister, Narset, that's a win on its own, basically.
You're also running Windfall to kind of get an extra wheel in there for Narset too. So definitely another way to kind of win the game without necessarily needing to go infinite.
So next up, let's talk about the signature cards in Urza. These are the cards that see play specifically in Urza because they are so good with Urza. Probably, I would say most of these are do not cut these cards, even though they may not look super powerful. With Urza specifically, they get a lot of boost. Urza is kind of like a stacks mid-range deck. It's somewhere in between. Not a full-blown stacks deck, but there are definitely some stacks elements that work really well with Urza, right?
That's the thing, right? So you're kind of taking advantage of what mono blue can do, and that's play all of the best stack interaction, plus also play these really cool artifacts that will also interact with the board that kind of break parity for you.
Right, yeah, and that's why another reason why Urza is so good is because it can break parity on some of these cards.
Exactly. So the first one that I want to talk about is Winter Orb. What makes Winter Orb specifically busted in Urza is that right before it's your turn, you're able to tap Winter Orb to shut it off so that you are able to untap all of your lands.
Right. If you use Urza to tap the Winter Orb for a blue when your opponent's end step right before you, it'll be tapped, which means Winter Orb will let you untap. So because it's off, well, that's how old artifacts work. Since the Winter Orb is now off, it lets you untap all of your stuff, including the Winter Orb, so that your next opponent will still suffer the consequences, but you get to untap all of your stuff.
The other one that does that as well is Trinisphere. You can also turn off Trinisphere if you need to start going off. You can tap it with Urza, make some mana for yourself, and then that way you're not being held down by the rest of the board too. Static Orb, really fucking powerful. Back to basics. Hooray. Monocolored blue deck that lets you just shut off more lands. Love it.
Yeah, definitely one of the main reasons, one of the best reasons to play mono blue is Back to Basics, in my opinion. Back to Basics can be a really powerful card, but only in the right deck.
You have 16 basic lands in the deck, so you're set up to be in a very good spot. Some of the other stacks pieces that we run are Tangle Wire. This one's just kind of generically good in a lot of different stacks decks. Being an artifact just helps you out even more.
And a lot of times you are playing a lot of artifacts that you can tap, like the Static Orb for the Tangle Wire, and it doesn't matter that it's tapped. You don't care that it's tapped. It still does the exact same thing. You can tap the Karn. Urza has a lot of permanents that can just dump out into the battlefield, so it can play really well into some of these stacks pieces that benefit off of the amount of permanents that you have.
Trail of Evidence kind of toes the line between card advantage and mana advantage. Usually, I find myself getting more mana out of this card than additional cards.
But definitely a staple for Urza decks, I would say. Probably this is the only deck that this card will see play in is in Urza, and it's really good in Urza because you can tap those clues for blue mana.
The rest of the signature cards are these other rocks that I was referring to that aren't actual rocks. The 0 mana ones are the best. You get Tormod's Crypt, which is fantastic against decks like Gitrog. You get Jeweled Amulet as just kind of another little free rock. Welding Jar can let you make sure that your artifacts also don't die when you're trying to combo off. Urza's and Mishra's Bauble help you get extra cards. You have 1 mana ones as well, like Arkham's Astrolabe, which is the reason why you're running all snow basics. Witching Well is another good 1 mana one that helps you get some extra value off the ETB. Pithing Needle doubles as a rock and a stacks piece.
Pithing Needle is really nice because it's basically a cursed totem that doesn't affect your Urza, and if you think about it, you're probably not going to be playing against more than one deck that's going to be suffering from the curse totem. So from what I mean is you'll probably just have a Kenrith at the table, or a Thrasius, or an Agila. It'll be rare that you'll have multiple opponents that are going to suffer from a curse totem. So Pithing Needle will act like a 1 mana curse totem that can tap for mana itself in this deck while not affecting yourself, because Urza doesn't like curse totem.
Exactly. And then the final one that we have is Sensei's Divining Top, which is just an awesome card. It just helps you with your filtering specifically while also potentially adding new mana.
Yeah, and a lot of those 0 mana ones are so important because they basically act as mock sapphires in Urza, as well as giving you a little bit of extra value when needed.
It does sting sometimes when you're looking at like certain opening hands and they have some of those rocks in there and you go, all right, well, this will be good. once I get Urza, but this hand doesn't cast Urza.
Next up, let's talk about interaction. One of the pros of mono blue is you really don't lose out a ton on stack or board interaction. Mono blue kind of has it all. So what are the counter spells and board interaction that we're running here?
So we're going to start with counter spells. We got a bunch of free counter spells, including things like Force of Will, Force of Negation, Fierce Guardianship, Pact of Negation, and Mental Misstep. These are some of the best counters you're going to find in the format right
They're free.
here.
That's why they're so good, because they're free.
You're not
free
gonna find,
is the best.
You're not going to find a blue deck, for the most part, that doesn't run 4 out of 5 of those. There's some 1-mana counters, including Dispel, Spell Pierce, and Swan Song. These are also some of the most powerful counters in the format, only at 1 mana.
They counter ad nauseum, as well as being really good at stopping other counter spells. Those ones specifically, Dispel and Swan Song, those can all counter other counter spells for 1 mana. So they're really good at protecting your stuff.
Yeah.
You cast your Polymorph, someone casts Force of Will, with just 1 blue mana, you can interact with all of that with all those 3 spells.
And again, it's incredibly clear. Swan Song is the best 1-mana counter ever printed. Your 2-mana interactive pieces, we did kind of mention Narset's Reversal, but Mana Drain. This is also a very, very nice Mana Drain deck. I wouldn't cut this card for shit.
Normally, I would say right now in cEDH, 2-mana counterspells are a touch too slow, but in a deck like Urza that's trying to push towards the late game, I think they're fine, especially because Narset's Reversal can be used as a win con, and Mana Drain is just such a powerful tempo effect when you can use that mana, and Urza can do a lot with a bunch of colorless extra mana.
Oh, 100%. Most of my blue decks are still... It's in Jessica Ishai. You're going to find it in most of my blue decks still.
I've cut Mana Drain from a lot of mine, but most of my blue decks are 4-color ad nauseum decks, and I don't love it as much there. Although Mana Drain can be good in ad nauseum decks.
That's how you cast ad nauseum.
That's how you cast your ad nauseum. I've been cutting it. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know.
A lot of people have. I don't know. I think it's really good. Shut up, Cameron. Talk about the stack interactive pieces.
So you talked about the counterspells. Talk to me about how else we're interacting with the table.
So I run 5 board interactive spells here, and I started to think that I'm not going to go home with any less than 5 in any of my cEDH decks anymore. Even though I'm running a lot of stacks pieces, there's enough stacks pieces out there that I need to get rid of, a la Collector Oofs.
Collector Oof, Drowneth Magistrate, both of those cards are really good against Urza.
Exactly. So there's 2 free ones that you have. Collector Oof decks hate to see the Submerge coming at them. Thassa's Oracle decks also hate to see Submerge coming at them too.
And since you're not playing Nas, it doesn't matter how you CMC in your cards. It can be a billion mana, especially if you're casting them from free. Submerge is great.
Snap Back All on the Floor is the... other free one that you have that is only good for creatures, but there's a lot of really pesky, rule of law creatures that are out there. Chain of Vapor, also another card that you never see anyone leave home without. Resculpt has been incredibly impressive because not only does it hit creatures, it also hits artifacts too. So dealing with Oof or Null Rod, very helpful.
Basically, the blue Abrade does the exact same thing, and that 4/4 really isn't going to matter.
No, exactly, because I'm going to win the game after I cast this spell. And then the other one is Cyclonic Rift, another blue card that I haven't been leaving home without, especially with how much mana you're able to generate. You could put this under Isochron Scepter. Like, there's so much stuff you can do with this.
Let's talk about how we're actually going to find the win. We talked about the win. We talked about how we're getting to the win. We talked about how we're protecting and removing things so that we can win. How do we actually find the win? How do we draw into it? How do we tutor for it?
Well, let's start with the draw spells here. So we got a couple of cantrips to get things started off. Gitaxium Probe, you'll see in every single blue cEDH deck. Same thing with Brainstorm. Ponder and Preordain are really good at helping me set up draws here. I'm also in mono blue, so I might as well be running them. You also have, I like to count Dig Through Time because this card does not necessarily get you an absorbent amount of cards, but it's still incredibly powerful and helps you find exactly what you need.
You're not in playing Underworld Breach. There's no other real use for your graveyard, so delving is pretty easy. And a lot of those cantrips don't see as much play anymore, but I think the reason for that is because commanders are getting a lot better. You don't need the cantrips if your commander is Tymna because you're drawing so many cards, but this deck doesn't actually have free card advantage stapled onto it. The 5-mana activation can act as some form of card advantage, but it's not really what you want to be doing, just blindly activating that. So the cantrips help you get forward, push through your game plan, draw a couple cards, and since all your artifacts tap for a blue mana, they're a little bit easier to cast than normal.
And we have a couple of more burst card draw and long-term card draw spells that are in this deck too. Obviously we're in blue, so we're going to be playing Heuristic Study and Mystic Remora as well. But then you'll see a couple of other cards that you don't really see in a lot of other decks here. One of them that we already talked about is Drowning Dreams. This, if I need to draw 5 to 10 cards, I'm able to do that with this too.
And Urza can make a lot of extra mana. Like we've been talking about, those artifacts are going to stack up. And with Urza, you can tap them all for mana, dump them into the next spell, and draw a whole bunch of cards.
The other one that is really funny is Reoccurring Insight. This card, I looked at it, the first time I looked at Urza, I went, why the hell are we playing this thing? But then you cast it once, and over the course of 2 turns, it draws you 12 cards, and you win the game after? Okay, that's why.
Yeah. It's basically the blue ad nauseum, right? You're going to be drawing, like Cameron said, probably 6 cards, another 6 cards, and by that point, once you have this much mana, you should be able to piece together a win after that probably, or at least get into a really favorable position.
We do play a bunch of tutors here. A lot of them are artifact-specific tutors, the best one being Transmute Artifact specifically, just because it is pretty cheap, but Reshape is another one that is basically your second Transmute Artifact then. You also get Whir of Invention too, and what's specifically good about these 3 artifact tutors is that it puts the card into play right away.
Yep, it's extremely helpful, and Whir especially good as instant speed, getting an end step, being able to flash in a Winter Orb or a Trinisphere really quickly right from your deck is a very powerful effect.
Fabricate is another artifact tutor, just puts it right in your hand. It is a little bit expensive, but we're not in black, so we don't have options to the best tutors here. Muddle the Mixture is also one of the better tutors. Hilariously, both parts of the Isochron Scepter and 2 of the power artifact cards can be fetched out with Muddle the Mixture, so if you don't need the extra piece of interaction, which a lot of the times you don't really need, this is just an extra way to get a win con. Intuition is another tutor that's in here. Intuition, for me, a lot of the time, goes and gets a lot of the other tutors that I would specifically need, or it will go get me like a piece of interaction. You play a ton of free counterspells. Exactly. So you can go get Force of Will. It's a 3-mana Force of Will that way, but you get a second copy. The final tutor in the deck is Tezzeret the Seeker. This one is great. It only gets you artifacts when you minus them, but if Tezzeret survives around after you get the card that you need, you can start making a ton of extra mana. If you ultimate Tezzeret, you're not going to win the game because it's commander.
Okay, so we know how we're finding our win condition now. How are we paying for all of this? How are we paying to win? How are we paying to protect? How are we paying to find? What's the mana situation in Urza look like?
Pay to win is a whole other channel that we have. So this is one of the greatest Jeweled Lotus decks in the history of Jeweled Lotus decks. So obviously we're going to be playing Jeweled Lotus.
Mainly because after you've already cast your Urza, if you draw the Jeweled Lotus, it's still going to act as another Mox Sapphire.
You also play a lot of other 0-mana artifacts, including Mox Opal, Mox Diamond, Mana Crypt, and Chrome Mox as well.
Those are the staples that go in basically every deck. Mox Opal specifically in artifact denser decks, but the other ones just are going to go in every single deck.
We also have 2 1-mana ones that including Mana Vault and Soul Ring 2, also very good at helping you get Urza out on turn 2.
We don't have to explain why Soul Ring is good. It's
nope.
a good card.
And but we haven't really said this. Like, we really do want to get Urza out on turn 2, and there's so many of these cards that allow you to help do that.
It's a good thing to look for when you're mulliganing some of these specific ones that help you get turn 2 Urza, because that's going to be the difference in the games you win and lose.
And then Sapphire Medallion is also in here. Now, this does not technically help you cast some of your artifacts, but with Urza, you can tap it for blue, so it technically does.
You're also playing mono blue, so it lets you cast all of your blue spells for a lot cheaper. Which is a lot cheaper.
Which over time adds up quite a bit. Yeah.
So let's talk about lands too. We're also playing some lands in this deck. What are the interesting lands that Urza gets to play?
So you do get to play the fetch lands, all the blue fetch lands, which I still like to play because you are running things like Brainstorm in the deck. You do get to play 3 different 2-mana lands, including Ancient Tomb, Sprazin Scary, and City of Traders, which are all really good at still helping you get Urza out early. Even if your hand includes a lot of rocks that don't tap for mana without Urza, these still help you power them out early.
City of Traders is a powerful land that I think should probably see a little bit more play. Sprazin Scary? Is that what?
Yes, I think that's how you pronounce it. That's how I say it.
That one's a little bit interesting. It's a tap land. Tap lands are normally no good in cEDH, but this one taps for 2 blue when you get to untap with it, so it's a little bit worth the wait.
Well, that's the thing. And like when you play this on turn 1 and can still run out like another artifact or 2, it really doesn't feel bad because you're still getting turn 2 Urza a lot of the time.
And realistically, in cEDH, more often than not, you're really not tapping your lands more than 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. So the sacrifice clause is nothing. Another way you can technically ramp with your non-basic lands is Gemstone Cavern. You see that in every cEDH deck as well. I'm never lucky. I have a couple of blue non-basic lands in here. Seagate Restoration not only is a land, which I usually play as a land, but this is also a humongous burst card draw spell a lot of the time too. So it's very helpful to have these MDFCs in here. The worst card in the deck is Mystic Sanctuary. This is the only card that will actually fuck you up a lot of the time. However, you are able to search it out and you can go get your polymorph back from your graveyard that way, put it on top of your library. You're able to fetch it at instant speed, which is also very helpful. So
it's basically your only recursion. Have you ever thought about cutting this card out of your deck?
Many times. I thought about cutting it right before the video, so I didn't have to say that I played this card in this deck. This deck also lets you play the most colorless lands that you'll be able to in cEDH as well.
One of the benefits of monocolor decks is you get to play a couple more of these colorless free utility lands.
A monocolor deck and an artifact deck specifically too, right? So cards like Darksteel Citadel actually make a ton of sense in this deck. It's both an artifact and a land that's going to be able to tap.
So with Urza, it can tap for a blue mana too.
Exactly. You have his own Saga as well. Urza Saga, which can go get you a lot of extra mana as well after you're done making constructs or just tapping it for mana. Inventor's Fair is another tutor that's on a land, which is also super great to have. And then Blast Zone is just another way to get some board interaction in there that you do need to play around, but is still very powerful. The last cards in the deck that we haven't talked about are the 16 snow basic lands that you'll find in here as well. They're all the butt plug anal lands here, so
infer what you'd like from that.
Yeah. And that are the 100 cards that you'll see in Urza.
Before we go, let's go over some test hands in Urza, because this is the most important part of playing a deck, is what do the opening hands look like and how do we know what to mulligan for? So let's go over to Moxfield so we can do some test hands. Before we get into the test hands, maybe let's hypothesize some fantasy table that we're playing at just so we have an idea of what we're mulliganing for. So let's say we're going second. Let's say first up is Timna Krom.
Okay.
Then there's us. Then there's Najila. And then there's Timna Tana. So we got a fast deck in front of us, a mid-range deck after us, and a stacks deck at the end. Island, Arkham's Astrolabe, Basalt Monolith, Isochron Scepter, Dispel. What are your thoughts?
I don't love this hand. This does not accelerate you into Urza at all. You do get a redraw off of Astrolabe, and you do have like an interactive piece and a combo piece, but you have no tutors to get the other half of this combo. Your counterspell is arguably one of the worst ones you could have. In general, I'm not in love with this hand, and if this was my first 7, I could risk a second one.
I would definitely mulligan this one, I think. Yeah, this is definitely on your first 7. I think we're definitely mulliganing this one. Next hand, Chain of Vapor, Witching Well, Narset's Reversal, Rhystic Study, Force of Negation, City of Traders, Urza Saga. This one doesn't make any blue mana.
This one doesn't make any blue mana, which means that you're not going to get to Urza. We're going to 6.
We're going to 6, people. We're going to 6. Next hand is Narset's Reversal, Witching Well, Windfall, Snow-Covered Island, Urza's Bauble, Ancient Tomb, Back to Basics.
Out of all of the hands, this is hands down
easily the best hand. This is definitely a keep before we get anywhere, but we need to think about what we're putting to the bottom, because I think there's some options.
Yeah, I think there's some options too, and I'm thinking there's actually a lot of different options that you can put here. So this hand currently doesn't cast Narset's Reversal, which kind of makes me want to put that one at the bottom.
That's
here.
Definitely what I'm putting at the bottom. I think if I'm keeping this hand.
In theory, we could make an argument for like Urza's Bauble, but I would rather have that than Narset's Reversal.
Yeah, I think if this were me, I'm putting Narset's Reversal to the bottom of the library, and before I draw, my game plan is going to be Island, Bauble, Witching Well, and then turn to Windfall or Back to Basics, depending on how the game goes.
Let's do another test hand.
Let's do another test hand. Let's start another fresh 7, same table. Why not? We have Mystic Sanctuary, of course, in our opening hand.
Oh my god.
Soul Ring, Mystic Remora, Chromox, Snow-Covered Island, Winter Orb, and Narset's Reversal again.
Oh my god, we started off with Mystic Sanctuary, and then I look at this hand again and I go, oh my god, this hand is
definitely
insane.
Good. I have to think about exactly what we're doing with it. Do we want to do turn 1 Winter Orb or turn 1 Mystic Remora? I'm thinking maybe turn 1 Winter Orb.
Why not both? Yeah, because you can put Narset's Reversal under the Chrome Mox.
Let's do 1/3 final hand before we go. Okay. 4 islands, Mana Vault, Recurring Insight, Sensei's Divining Top.
This one actually sounds kind of close, right? Mana Vault.
Turn 2 Urza, which is one thing that we talked about being a good thing, but that's it. I don't know. I think I would be shipping this one on first 7.
This is
4 lands is just so many
4
lands.
lands is really hard, yeah. And turn 2 Urza is really nice, but after you get turn 2 Urza, you're not casting that reoccurring insight right away. I would keep this on 6 really hard.
If this was a Mulligan 6 or 5, I would keep this.
Yeah, but this
on
is
on a fresh 7.
I feel like I could do better on a fresh
Let's
7.
ship it.
Yeah.
Send it the fuck back. Next one, Mystic Sanctuary. Here again. Windfall, Snow-Covered Island, Reshape, Mox Diamond, Island. So 3 islands and the Mystic Sanctuary. So we got another 4-lander, but a Mox Diamond, so that's okay. Windfall and Reshape. This one's not great either.
This one is not great. I am already going to say I don't
it.
like it, especially in this pod.
Bin
Windfall's going to give someone else a lot of cards.
Ditch it.
Here's another 6 we're going to.
Chug it. This one's a no-lander. Do you even want me to read it to you? It's unplayable.
It's no lander and there's no rocks?
No lands, no rocks.
Get
Basalt
outta
Monolith,
here.
you're not doing anything forever with this hand. We're going to go to 5. Dig Through Time, Urza's Saga, Snow-Covered Island, Mana Vault, Flooded Strand, Force of Negation, Blast Zone. This is a 5, remember.
You're almost pigeonholed into putting back Blast Zone and Urza Saga so that you can go turn 2 Urza with Force of Negation, Dig Through Time, and just kind of hope you can get yourself there. So that's Urza. If you want to see more deck text similar to this, let us know in the comments down below.
If you'd like to see another deck tech, let us know what deck you'd like us to tech down in the comments.
We want to stick with our decks, first of all, though, I thought.
I know, yeah, we're not going to listen to them.
Oh, okay.
It's just for engagement.
Okay, good. All right, I'm okay with that. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at Patreon, like our $50 patrons.
Vapor Snag, Cody Dalton, C, Khwaja Ahamid, Jacob Depp, Reese Uker, Unforeseen God, CZ, Jan Wildfang, Adrian Grimm, Swampy McGee, Peter Larson, Cameron James, Jormags, Jimmy Midnight, Baby Jeebus, Ugly, and Moxfield. Thanks, y'all.
Check out our Bonfire store for our t-shirts, sweatshirts, and all of our other merch, too.
Check out any of the cards that we talked about today at the TCG Player affiliate link down below.
Check out our Alter Sleeves affiliate link for 5% off your order.
If you want to pick up any Dragon Shield product, you can do that at our affiliate link, which will also help out the channel.
And PlayToWinMTG.com is restocked.
We have playmats, we have sleeves, we have our new coins. Go check them out.
Thanks so much for watching.
See you next time.
The only one you'll find in the Cosmo Kramer sleeve over here.